Great. Welcome, everyone. Good evening. It is the first sunny day we've had in Philadelphia for a long time today. So thank you for choosing to spend your evening with us. My name is Meg. I'm the Executive Director of the League of Women Voters of Pennsylvania. And I'm really happy to welcome you tonight for the third event of our 2023 Voter Education Series, Ballot Box Basics. And just so you know, this webinar is being recorded, but since this is a webinar, your camera is turned off, so your face will not be included in the recording. Also, just a reminder that closed captioning is available in Zoom. And to enable closed captions on your screen, all you need to do is click the live transcript button on your Zoom taskbar. And if we can help you in any other way in terms of accessibility during the event, please just let us know. I am dropping a help doc in the chat when it comes to using closed captioning, if that can be of assistance to you. So we'll begin with our land acknowledgement. Next slide, please. So we'll begin our time together with this Pennsylvania land acknowledgement. Colonial Pennsylvania boundaries were first drawn in 1681 over original nation's land. We in Pennsylvania acknowledge the land ownership of original indigenous peoples, honoring the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the great nations of Pennsylvania, including the Erie, Iroquois, Muncie, Delaware, Shawnee, Ohio Valley, Susquehannock, and Lenape. We honor all original nations of the past and those among us today. Next slide. So a little bit about the League. I see a lot of League members here in the Zoom already, but if you're new to the League, I just want to introduce us quickly. We are a statewide, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. Here at the State League of Women Voters, we oversee a grassroots network of 31 local leagues all across the Commonwealth. And the mission of the League is to encourage active and informed participation in government, to increase understanding of major public policy issues like the one we're going to talk about tonight, and to influence public policy through education and advocacy. To learn more about our work and to subscribe to our action alerts, where you can hear all about different things that you can do to take action on policy issues, you can visit our website. And I will also drop those links in the chat, just ways to get involved additionally. Next slide, please. So here we are, Ballot Box Basics, the last event before the May primaries. We will have several other events for Ballot Box Basics for the fall, but this is the last event that we'll have before the primaries. And we chose this topic right before the primaries because it's really applicable. So we know that here in Pennsylvania, we have a closed primary system, which means that tax-paying voters, independent voters, are not allowed to select candidates. So we're here tonight to talk about why that system is, what we can do to change it. And I'm really excited to welcome tonight's panelist to really introduce us to this issue because she's been really active in the issue herself as an independent voter. So welcome Diana Dakey. She is a League member with the League in Lackawanna County. Diana tonight will be discussing primary systems and a proposed change for Pennsylvania to open primaries to unaffiliated voters, those voters not registered with a party, which is a really significant number in Pennsylvania. In fact, it's a growing number of voters who identify as independent. Diana herself is an unaffiliated voter, and for over 3 years, she's been really active on this issue in the statewide movement to open primaries. Diana serves on our State League's Government Policy Committee, and she regularly updates our statewide coalition on activities to open primaries. Previously, she has served as the president of the League in Lackawanna County and is currently the judge of elections for Glenburg Township. So just so everyone knows, and I'm sure Diana will also get into this, the League has had a long-standing position that Pennsylvania should abandon closed primaries in favor of open or semi-open primaries. The League has not endorsed any particular bill at this time, but we are monitoring legislation, and Diana will tell us all about that. So just one final thing, we encourage everyone tonight to ask questions, to engage with the material through the chat. If you do have a question, we ask that you put it in the Q&A function of Zoom. You'll see that in your taskbar, the little Q&A button. We'll leave about 10 minutes at the end for questions. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Diana. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Meg. I greatly appreciate that introduction. And I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. Will you enable the screen sharing for me? And then I will do that.
You should be good to go.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for that little technical point there. Yeah, so once again, I want to thank the Voter Services Committee of the League of Women Voters and to Rochelle Kaplan for her leadership on that committee. You know, this topic is certainly in the headlines lately. You may have seen several articles in the press with the introduction and press conference for Senate Bill 400 last week. And I'm going to tell you what's going on and why there are bills. Here we are, League of Women Voters, empowering voters and defending democracy. To empower voters, we can't continue to shut out over 1 million Pennsylvanians from primary elections that often determine who represents them. And defending democracy, public officials should be accountable to the electorate at large, not just party bases. Primary elections are key to both empowering voters and defending democracy, but the primary elections they're coming up short in both of these criteria. So why? So in Pennsylvania, you know, if you're not included, you're excluded. We are a closed primary state. Voters who are not registered as Republicans or Democrats are barred from voting in taxpayer-funded primaries.
Diana,
and so,
Diana,
yes.
I hate to interrupt you, but if your slides are not up, we cannot see your slides.
Okay.
At least I can't see your slides, and I could before.
Yeah, so Diana, just click that green share screen button at the bottom of your taskbar. The green one in the middle.
It's
a green button with a little arrow pointing up that says share screen.
I'm so sorry. I see what I did need to do now.
Take your time. Take your time.
Share screen, and here we go. Can you see them now?
It's loading.
Yes.
Yes. Now we can see.
They're perfect, Diana.
All
perfect.
Set.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah. Okay. So and I want to. There we go. Okay. There we go. There was my first slide, and was pointing out that if you're not included, you're excluded. Now, I'm going to use throughout this presentation 3 terms interchangeably: independent, unaffiliated, and unenrolled. They're roughly the same with you know, minor distinctions. So I just have to have this public service announcement here. Even though independent or unaffiliated voters don't vote in primaries, with the May election coming up, there are special elections in a couple of legislative districts, 163 and 108, and voters need to go to the polls and vote in those. And some counties or municipalities have ballot initiatives. And so that is critical for you to make sure you participate if that's happening in your county. As Meg said, the League of Women Voters Pennsylvania has had a longstanding position that we oppose the current system of closed primaries, which exclude participation by voters who do not register with one of the major parties. And that we believe changing the primary structure to one which includes all electors would increase voter participation and could reduce political polarization. The League of Women Voters of Pennsylvania supports changing to an open primary system or a semi-open primary system. And I am going to be explaining the differences in types of primaries for you. Well, a primary is used to determine the nominees for political parties in advance of a general election, and to narrow the field of candidates for a given elective office in advance of a general election. And originally, or a century ago, it was started to inject the public into a formally party machine process. And so we have our 1937 Pennsylvania election code. And then the overall general types of primaries, well, they're open or closed. Open is registration with a party is not a condition for participation. Closed is where registration is a condition for participation. That's us in Pennsylvania. And primaries are either partisan or nonpartisan. Partisan is where you have separate Republican and Democratic ballots. That's what we have in Pennsylvania. Nonpartisan would be one primary ballot for all candidates, such as those recently introduced top two and top four systems. So we're having this conversation tonight because closed primaries don't work for democracy. There's low turnout. There might be primaries, there's been turnout as low as 25%. And therefore we have the party base determining who advances to the general election. And then if you have, low turnout in the general election, you have a sliver of the electorate determining who ultimately goes on to office. That fourth bullet there, due to gerrymandering and demographics, the election might be decided in the primary, and then the November election just becomes a formality. And with all of this, we see voter disinterest in the primary and the general. A few years ago, there was a report by the Knight Foundation, and they found that an important reason for voter non-participation in a general election is don't like the candidates. So low turnout, low participation in a primary spills over into low participation into a general election. This can't be good for democracy. And unfortunately, when these elected legislators weren't elected by the wide electorate, they're once elected, their agenda is geared to avoiding future primary challenges. And that last bullet, local government matters. That's what we're electing this year, yet few voters participate. Many municipal elected offices have no reason for partisan politics. You don't need to be a Republican or a Democrat to put together a solid township budget and fix roads. So why open the primaries? Well, democracy needs participation, and here we are excluding 1.1 million, or that's 1 out of 7 voters. Proposals to open primaries to independent voters are popular across the spectrum, and some groups have done some studies on this. And all taxpayers pay for election primaries. That's been it's estimated that it costs 20 million each spring to run a primary election. So we have taxation without representation for those 1.1 million voters. And here we are, we're in the past. We're one of only 9 states that completely excludes independent voters, with relying on our 1937 election code. So, how will we benefit? Increased voter turnout, greater impact on choices of general election candidates. And we assume it will follow that there will be greater responsiveness of elected officials to a larger electorate. Now, in a previous slide, I showed you just some general primary types. And here I have details on primary types. And the whole point of all of the detail on this slide is just to make the point that it's complicated in a way, but it's not complicated in some other ways. Of primary types across the country, there are now open nonpartisan primaries, such as the top 2 in some states and the top 4, followed by ranked choice voting in Alaska. And then there are open partisan, where a voter can participate in the partisan primary of his or her choice. So there's 2 ballots, but voters just go and they can participate in the primary of his or her choice. So that's a fully open primary. Then we have the degrees of open or closed. Partially open, some in some states, a voter can declare a party affiliation on the day of election. And then there are semi-open, which is what we're trying to do in Pennsylvania, where Republicans and Democrats will still vote in their lane on their ballots, but voters who are neither Republican or Democrat the ballots would be open to them. So there are a number of states already doing this. That's what the bills in Pennsylvania have proposed this session and past sessions. Then there's other variations, closed primaries, but independents can affiliate with a party on the day of election, formally affiliate, and then change after the election, which you might say that's what you can do here in Pennsylvania, as long as you meet the deadline for doing it. You can't do it on the day of election. Then there were closed primaries. Voters have to register as Republican or Democrat in order to participate. And so you see they're highlighted, fully closed by statute. There we are, Pennsylvania, among those 9 states. Then there's another small variation where they're closed, but the state law allows parties to decide. So parties, could decide. And at the bottom of the slide are some great references. If you're really interested in this, the League of Women Voters Vote 411 is an excellent resource, because you can go there and select a state, and then in the left-hand bar you can see that click on primaries, and it'll describe the types of primaries. I found that to be a great resource in doing this research, as well as those other websites that you see there. So the change proposed for Pennsylvania is semi-open primaries to allow unaffiliated or independent voters to vote in a primary. And so why is this an option for Pennsylvania to effectuate change? Well, I've got 4 bullets there for ways you can change. The first one, by statute, by law, a simple bill, changing the election code. That's what we believe we can do here in Pennsylvania. Another way would be by constitutional amendment. That's the joint resolution type of a bill. That's something we could do here in Pennsylvania, but we don't need to do that in Pennsylvania in order to enable unaffiliated voters to vote in primaries, because there's nothing in the Constitution that prohibits the unaffiliated voters from voting in the primary. So we simply have to just go the statute route and change our election code. And then the last 2 bullets there, we don't have that option here in Pennsylvania, but in some other places they're opening primaries using those routes. They have the option to do a citizen initiative to change a statute, or a citizen initiative to do a constitutional amendment. And if you're interested in that topic, the ballot pa.org has maps showing you types, states with initiative and or referendum. And incidentally, the League of Women Voters of Pennsylvania does have a position supporting the concept of initiative and referendum in our where we stand. So that's a topic, for another time, I believe. So on to what's happening in with bills this session. So on April 26th, Senate Bill 400 was introduced. April 26th was also when the League of Women Voters was in Pennsylvania for our lobby day. It was very exciting for all of us who were there, going out and visiting our legislators. But at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, there was a press conference, and Senate Bill 400 was introduced. Prime sponsors Dan Laughlin and Lisa Boscola. And I believe, but I didn't check, but you should be able to find a link to that press conference. I believe if you would go to Senator Laughlin's website, I believe it's there. And then also just introduced our House Bills 796, Marla Brown, she's a Republican, and she introduced a bill which is like Chris Quinn's bill that was in the House last session. And House Bill 797, Jared Solomon and Chris Rabb, they are Democrats, and So this is all good because in both the chambers and in the Senate Bill 400 is bipartisan support, and then over in the House there are bills by Republicans and Democrats, and we're anticipating that they will be getting bipartisan support on all of these bills. So I'm going to just drill down here in Senate Bill 400. The bills are similar, and you can go read them. But basically, what is Senate Bill 400 going to do? It's going to enable that unenrolled electors may, and unenrolled is the same term as unaffiliated, may ask to cast a vote for the Republican or Democratic ballot. But they will not be bound by that choice in future elections. So it doesn't create a formal record of them registering as with a party. Second bullet, the Republican or Democratic voters would still vote on their respective primary ballots. And then other third-party voters and candidates would continue to participate in the general election the way they do now. They have a petition process that the Greens and Libertarians use. And there would be no change to party-specific elections of committee people, officers, or delegates, because those are strictly party functions. The state is running those, but they're not primaries per se. And then, so this in Senate Bill 400, the words unenrolled elector shall mean a person who's registered to vote within an election district, having selected none or no affiliation or independent in regard to a political party on their Pennsylvania voter registration application. And then the bill goes on to describe the procedure and the section of the election code that it's revising. And you see A there, the voter will go to the polls. The elections officer will ask them which primary they would like to vote in, and make a notation of that. There has to be a record of this, obviously, for voter audits and recount purposes. And then that B there, I think I already made that point. There's the ballot provided to the unenrolled elector is not going to include selections for party officers or committee people. And it doesn't, as I said, it doesn't make a permanent record of the person having enrolled in a party. And then Senate Bill 400 has some points in there about what will have to happen to effectuate these changes. The Secretary of the Commonwealth, in collaboration with counties, they'll have to provide guidance and training for county boards and poll workers. As a judge of elections myself, I don't see any huge hurdles in getting this done. There will be a process, they'll have to adjust the absentee or mail-in ballot process, and then modify the SURE system as needed. Most people haven't looked at this in quite a while, and we don't even know if legislators recall how what the voter registration form looks like. But when you register to vote in Pennsylvania, it does tell you that to vote in a primary, you must register with either the Democratic or the Republican Party. We don't know how many, since there's so many unenrolled electors, we don't know how many people notice that, or maybe it doesn't register with them that they're not going to be able to vote in the primary, or they don't understand the consequences of not voting in the primary. And then on the form, you can check Democratic, Republican, Green, Libertarian, or none, no affiliation, and other. Now, the none, no affiliation was specifically mentioned in Senate Bill 400 as one of the types of voters who would now be enrolled or would now not be enrolled, but would now be allowed to vote in the primary. And then the Senate bill also says independent. So this is a little bit of a data problem that would have to be worked out with the Department of State, because there's no public facing data that I've seen that breaks out what data the state has for other, and whether people are indeed writing down independent, but we suspect that they are. And the reason we're suspecting that they are is because when you look at the Department of State data, see, we have 8.6 million voters in Pennsylvania. We've got Democrats, Republicans, and then that other, that other. So the state data is showing that there's 350,000 other. But if you, there are some data on how many Greens and Libertarians there are, and there's some election returns for Keystone Party, and we can estimate that how many might be in some, other types of minor parties, and figures that people who have crunched numbers, the folks over at the Ballot PA Repeal Closed Primaries Coalition and independent voters, independent Pennsylvanians, as well as myself, figure that that number should be 151,000, not 351,000. So, but we won't know that for sure until the Department of State, breaks out who, and shows data as to what's in other. And so if you add that to the none, there are specifically 929,000 people put none, then the adjusted estimate of no affiliation is 1.1 million. So that's the number. You've seen that number in numerous press releases, 1.1 million voters, or, not able to vote in primaries. And so, that's the number to have the conversation with people. That's the number we're talking about. And then, so also, if you do some percentages, that no affiliation is around 11%. The all who are not Democratic and Republican, that's close to 15%. And then that 1.1 million, though, that would be around 13% of voters. I did some, I enjoy data, and I took the Department of State county specific data, and I sorted it by counties with the most none and the most other voters. And wow, look, if you add, Pike, Lehigh, Monroe, look at the northeast corner of the state. Look at the South Central, like York and Center County. Really interesting. The Lehigh, Lehigh County there, and Pike County. That's just quite astonishing that we have that many who check the none. And then I didn't separate out this data to fine tune the none plus the others that we think wrote down independent, but it could very well be around 20% in those counties: Pike, Lehigh, Monroe, Northampton. And so everybody says, well, who are independent voters? So the Ballot PA Repeal Closed Primaries, they've estimated that it's 49% of veterans, which could be 40,000 individuals, or 47% and 47% of the under 40 years of age people. And across the United States, independent voters are a fast growing bloc among new voters. Now Gallup does a poll. Now this is not voter registration data, but they ask this question: in politics as of today, do you consider yourself Republican, Democrat, or Independent? And people consider themselves, 49% of voters consider themselves independent, as opposed to only 25% considering themselves Republican or Democrat, respectively. So that's a lot. And that was in March of this year. So this effort to get bills passed to open Pennsylvania primaries to all of those voters have been around for a long time. I've been following this for 5 years, and we've had bills in all of these sessions that I've been following it. At the press conference last Wednesday, I learned from Lisa Boscola that she's been following this for a decade or more. So, or excuse me, for 2 decades, I believe she said. So, this is, people have been aware for quite some time that our primaries are limiting voter participation. around the country. So are we going to succeed? Is anybody else succeeding around the country with using the legislative route? You know, since we don't have citizen initiative or that citizen initiative process. So did any other state succeed using the legislative process? So Rhode Island, they're now semi-open. They did pass something in 2019. Maine passed legislation in 2021. New Mexico is working on with their legislature right now. And they have a Senate bill that's working its way. They're working a couple different avenues in the House. They have a joint resolution for a constitutional change. So they're taking a multi-pronged approach. If you're interested in what's going on all around the country in different states, I would encourage you to sign up for emails with openprimaries.org, and you'll get a lot of interesting news, and you'll get invited to discussions to hear about what's going on. And Maine is interesting because being the most recent ones to succeed using the legislative route, the factors that contributed to their passage are very similar to what we have going for us here in Pennsylvania. It had been introduced in a previous session. Legislative turnover, a large freshman class. Well, that's what we've got going on in this legislative session. Growth of independent voters among millennials and veterans. Endorsement by leading press. There has been a huge amount of endorsement by the press. Support by the League of Women Voters in Maine. And the messaging was key in Maine to their success. You know, this movement is not anti-party, it's pro-democracy. And it just makes sense for our state to move in this direction. And, in talking to candidates or incumbents, voters might not be interested in your party, but they might be interested in you as a candidate. And, if they can vote for you in a primary, they might attend a candidate event, and you'll be able to connect with candidates early on. So that was some of the messaging that worked in Maine. Let's see. So why would incumbent legislators support opening primaries to independent voters? Reason to talk to voters other than the base, and talk about genuine issues, engagement with more voters. Nothing to lose from more voters, right? We have new districts now, new districts, new voters. That's an opportunity to engage with new voters. And if voters that connect with you as a candidate might want, by extension, to support the party. So, why would anybody be opposed? There's lack of information. I honestly don't think that many legislators know that we're talking about 1 out of 7 voters. I don't think they recall what the voter registration form looks like. We were aware that there's some misinformation that they think that this is opening up to crossover voting, that Republicans are going to vote for Democrats or Democrats are going to vote. No, that's absolutely not going to happen. Those voters still stay registered and they vote, on their ballot. Complacency is a problem because why change the system that got you elected, right? And then there's always fear of the unknown. One fear we've heard is it's going to cost more to campaign. But if you reach out in the primary, then you've got those voters in your camp, instead of having to just campaign to all of them in the general. There's a fear of, well, gee, if we have independent voters voting, is that going to change who my opposing party elects? And so fear of the unknown is a huge fear. But if you just look at for how long these bills have been along, and it really is time to overcome those fears and bring Pennsylvania into the modern era. And so you could be a change agent, inform legislators of the league's position to open primaries, and urge legislators to co-sponsor one of the bills. League hasn't endorsed any particular bill. They may change. You can write letters to the chairs of the committees, asking them to move these. If you're in this, listening to this webinar and you're not a league member, please join us. And the League of Women Voters, we study issues, define what's at the heart of issues, and we take action on priority issues. The rules reform is key, and the league is working on that. The Fix Harrisburg effort, you'll find web pages devoted to that effort. Rules could have enabled this legislation to move in 2019 when it passed in the Senate with only 8 nay votes, a bill to open the primaries. And then sadly, it got no traction at all in the House. But if we had better rules, maybe something could have happened. And then there's these couple of groups, Ballot PA, repealed closed primaries, and or independent Pennsylvanians join their websites. So there we are. There's the league. Join us. The ballotpa.org. It's a statewide coalition. The league participates with them. PAindependence.org. It's a grassroots group. They have monthly conversations, first Monday of every month at 7 o'clock, where you can talk to other independent voters and find out, find out what people are thinking and what is going on with independent voters. Okay, so that concludes part 1 of my presentation, and I wanted to also, one other thing you can do on May 9th, openprimariespa.org at 3 o'clock in the afternoon is having a webinar, and they are having guests from Pennsylvania. Openprimaries.org is a national organization, but they're having guests from Pennsylvania, so that's worth tuning into. Okay, well, municipal elections coming up. I have a few slides on that topic. I am not an expert on this, and I did some research in order to bring some information to you. So, as you know, the odd numbered years are municipal elections. Please do vote, because your local government is your first line of representation, and municipal elections matter a lot. But unfortunately, we have closed primaries, although it doesn't take a partisan approach to fix a bridge. In recognition of the fact that local services have little partisan connection, some thinkers have proposed ranked choice voting for municipal elections. And so I just have a few slides on who is proposing that ranked choice voting be used for municipal elections. So first of all, ranked choice voting is a way of tabulating votes. It's formally called instant runoff. It could be used for any election, municipal, state, federal. It could even be used for a party's primary, because it's simply a way of tabulating votes. And the voters rank all the candidates for a given office by preference. And then on the first tabulation, if no candidate gets 50 plus, then the least voted candidate is eliminated, elevating the second choices for a retabulation. And then a winner is declared when the candidate has a majority. Now, there are some excellent YouTube videos out there on it seems very abstract at first, but I would encourage you just to go watch some of those great visuals out there on how ranked choice voting works. So, and where is it used? And as I said, it's a method of tabulating. So it's used in all these different kinds of elections. 17 cities, some special elections. Fairvote.org, they have this map. And again, if you're very interested in this, you can drill down to where it's used and these types of elections. And they have this map, and you can. So, municipal elections, where are municipal elections using it? So the purple dots are where it's used. So we see that it's there's a big cluster over there in Utah, and then we see another big cluster over there in Minnesota. So I'm going to share about Minnesota, because they've been doing this for a very long time. Minneapolis has been doing ranked choice voting since 2006. And their website chronicles how they have made constant refinements in the process over the years. They've really fine-tuned and looked at all of the any pitfalls or miscommunications, and they're probably the leaders in how somebody would want to get it done. Where where are the upcoming trends for where it's getting done? There's a House bill in Colorado, New York Senate bill, South Dakota. Minnesota is looking to expand it to more municipalities. And here in Pennsylvania, we have our very own Senate bill. Senator Anthony Williams has a bill. So please check it out. So, I was going to look to see if that got introduced. Last time I checked, and I'm sorry, that was a couple days ago, and I didn't check today to see if the bill has now been introduced. It's in memo form, Senator Anthony Williams. So the bill is titled Nonpartisan Municipal Elections. So what's interesting is that it calls for a single election in the election cycle. In other words, no primary. But the single election will use ranked choice voting. So it would omit the primary and do ranked choice voting in the municipal election in the fall. So, and my question was, well, why do we need a bill? Can't just, municipalities, some of them have home rule charters and so forth, go straight ahead and do this. And the reason is, of course, again, our antique election code has some language in there that says, municipal elections, there's some language talking about municipal primaries. So that's why there's a bill to that has to create this change to our election code, or there will be a bill when it's introduced. So please check that out. In the memo, Senator Williams says that in Philadelphia, 23% or nearly 250,000 voters don't get a say in who represents them on city council or runs the district attorney's office, and just simply due to not being affiliated with Republican or Democratic primaries. So then there are arguments in favor of ranked choice voting. So one of them is that a majority now, rather than a plurality, will be determining the winner. After the ranking is done, you're finding somebody with 50+ percent of voters with could be voters' first choices and those elevated second choices of voters, which arguments those people who are opposed to ranked choice voting find that this is a reason they're opposed. They want the old plurality system. Okay, so back to the arguments in favor. Well, the independent voters will vote. You'd have increased turnout, competition of ideas, which is what Senator Williams mentions. Candidates have to appeal to the full electorate with their ideas, and certainly this is relevant for municipal elections. Something like Senator Williams' bill will reduce the number of elections. Proponents of ranked choice voting stress that it would be less negative, and then there would be no need for negative or strategic voting. This is new, and a lot of benefits to exploring that. So I am going to stop there, and it's 6:16. Take some questions.
Great. Thanks, Diana. Would you mind just unsharing your screen?
No. Okay, there we go. All right.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. I myself learned a lot, and I thought I knew everything about this issue. So thank you so much, Diana. We have a couple of questions just ready to go. And again, folks, if you have any additional questions, feel free to drop the Q&A, use the Q&A function to ask questions. So Our first question, which I think is a great one, is why do you think Pennsylvania has stuck with such an outdated voter code for so many years when there's so many other states that have modernized how their system works? What are your thoughts on that?
Wow, that's a very good question. Well, I will hazard a theory. Could it be because we have one of the largest full-time legislatures in the country? And could it be that legislators are focused on their parochial or regional set of voters and aren't thinking about the electorate at large in the state? That's one reason. Rochelle, do you have a reason?
I'm sorry, I was writing you a question. I just think that they're stuck in the past, and there are entrenched interests in both political parties. They like the status quo, and it's I think fear of the unknown, as Diana said, is just huge. One of the questions I was going to pose to Diana is two legislators in Lehigh County, one a Republican, one a Democrat, both said to me, and I'm paraphrasing, number one, shenanigans will happen, but number two, democracy is not a spectator sport. What's the big deal about, for one election, picking a party? You can unpick that party day after election. So what's the big deal?
Yeah. Well, that the shenanigans argument, there are legislators who think that Republicans are there's going to be something called strategic voting, which that could happen now, but it doesn't happen, and strategic voting is where some group would instruct voters to vote a certain way rather than to vote their true preference. Well, first of all, I don't know who would ever organize independent voters to do such a thing. If the independent voters they're not Republicans and they're not Democrats, who in the world would give them a message that they were supposed to go do strategic voting, because they're not organized?
Right.
So that's the reason why.
Anyway, they wouldn't listen anyway.
That's not going to happen. Yeah. And what was the other thought? I just lost my train of thought on that. Oh, why don't you just go vote for? Why don't you just register for one? Well, independent voters can do that, and some do that. That's a personal choice. There are people who think that, yeah, something really matters to me, and I've got to do it. And today's the deadline, right, for registering to vote or changing your registration, right?
Yes.
But there are all of those veterans who are unaffiliated by choice, and there's a lot of other people who are unaffiliated by choice because it doesn't fit their philosophy, or due to their job or their role, they may feel that I have to put myself forward as nonpartisan. The league is, we're all nonpartisan, but we are either affiliated or or we're not. But there are some people who might feel that it would be hazardous for them in their role to be registered with a particular party. Yeah.
Right. It's interesting you point that out, because there's a professor in Muhlenberg that does all kinds of polling studies, and he intentionally is an independent voter because he wants to be viewed as a credible, nonpartisan election pollster. So that's exactly what happens. I had another question that irks me. dealing with the primaries, we do cross-filing in the primaries for school board candidates and some judicial candidates. Would that be another good argument to make to these legislators? You know, we're cross-filing candidates, so what's the point of keeping
Yeah.
Democrats and independents out of the Democrat and Republican ballot?
That's another very good point. That's another good argument. Why keep them out? Right.
Yeah. That's a great response. Thanks to you both for jumping in. I think one thing that really strikes me is that argument of we'll just change, pick a party and then unregister. I mean, that's an administrative burden. Like, that's something that not everyone knows how to do, has necessarily the time to do. What if they forget one year? And so I think, here at the League, we believe that voting should be as convenient as possible. So just asking people to take that additional step could lead to folks not voting at all. So I think we need to keep that in mind too. And, Diana, I have another question. I mean, obviously the League's position on this is very clear. We support open primaries, but I think for anyone who's on the fence or a little bit unsure, I mean, what would you say are the main arguments for keeping closed primaries? I mean, I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit here, but what are the main kind of opponents of opening primaries tend to say about it?
Well, they say that they have the sports analogy that there are teams, like in football, and you're on one team or you're on the other team. That if you want to vote in our primary, register with our party, and that's the argument they have. But the election code in 1937 wasn't set up in order to form exclusive clubs. Now I didn't research all the history about it, but the little bit of history I know is that, prior to the state getting involved in it, there were concerns about, whether just some the old smoke-filled rooms were being used to pick candidates, and this was a way of bringing voters in, and perhaps it did compared to 1937. But with all these years, almost a century going by, and here we find ourselves as one of only 9 states with fully closed primaries. We should get with the present. And so to those people who just want to keep it an exclusive club, I would say, well, why? Okay, you've liked having this exclusive club, but what is your objection? I would throw the question back at them. What would be a problem with opening the primaries to more voters? There are all these ways in which that can benefit you. You can reach out and establish relationships with more voters earlier in the election cycle.
Yeah, it's a great point. Well, I have one final question for you, Diana. And that is just, how do we message? So I think this can be a little bit of a convoluted issue. And for someone who's not super engaged in advocacy or elections, this topic can be really confusing. So what do you think what's the best way to message this really simply to voters about why it matters? So for example, the messaging that I always think of is, there are millions of independent voters who pay taxes, who pay for elections, who don't get to make their voices heard in the primaries. Are there any other just really clear-cut messages that our members and folks on this call can take out with them to their communities to just share why we should repeal closed primaries?
Well, yes, you've certainly mentioned one very important one. So, we've seen that it's we're figuring this is, 13 to 15% of voters, they pay taxes just like all voters. But the League, we are about defending democracy, and we want to know that our elected officials um, uh, feel a responsibility to all voters. And if we open primaries and all voters have a voice in getting them into office, then once they're in office, they will engage with more voters, not just their base or their funders who got them elected in the primary. So I think that we're going to get better governance, and I would hope that our legislators, they did go down initially, if they can remember why they wanted to run for office and why they got there in the first place, whether it's in Harrisburg or statewide office or county municipal or whatever. People ran for office for the right reason. They thought they could do something for the public, and so I think asking them to recall the core reasons for being an elected official, and that means engaging with all of your voters.
That's a brilliant point. And I could not agree more. I think, Pennsylvania voters have said time and time again that they're so sick of the hyper partisanship and the way that Harrisburg runs. So if this is a path forward to more collaborative governance, I think it makes all the sense in the world. So thank you so much, Diana. Do you have any, closing thoughts, Diana, before I turn it over to Rochelle to close us out?
Thank you very much for having me. And I'm happy that you recorded this, and a couple of people have already asked me who couldn't be here, asked me to make sure I get them the link.
Great.
So
yes.
we'll get this out to more people. Thanks so much.
Of course, we will definitely share the recording with anyone that registered. So please share widely. And we also published it on Facebook Live, so you could share it from Facebook as well. Great. Well, Rochelle, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, well, I want to thank Diana again. I've been working with Diana for a few years now. She got me involved with Independent Pennsylvanians and Ballot PA, and it's vital. And my little nugget that I leave with my legislators is, and I'm going to add the two that Diana said, I just say it's a form of voter suppression, and the League of Women Voters does not support anything that suppresses voters' ability to vote. So we really are passionate about this. I just wanted to remind everyone about Vote 411. That's the jewel of the league in my mind, in particular for municipal elections. Municipal elections, there's not a lot of hype, there's not a lot of media, social media or regular media, but Vote 411 is the way you can find out about your municipal candidates. Besides, you can find out about your polling place, you can find out about the various deadlines. As Diana said, today is the last day to register to vote. May 9th is the deadline for mail-in ballots. May 16th, 7 o'clock in the morning till 8 is the election. But all that information you can find on Vote 411 along with your candidates. And what's really nice this year is, in particular, because there are so many candidates running for school board or county commissioner, you can put in your race that you're interested in and compare multiple candidates' information and answer to their local league's questions. So you don't have to open one at a time. You can have it on the screen together. And as I said, for municipal elections with so many candidates for one office, it is an invaluable tool. The other thing I want to hype is the last two of our Ballot Box Basics series. We haven't picked a particular date, but look for in September a Ballot Box Basic on our judiciary, because there are judicial candidates, appellate level, common pleas level, and magisterial level on the ballot. So we're going to have Deborah Gross from Pennsylvania for Modern Courts talking to us about our judiciary and the different roles and responsibilities of the judges at these different levels. And then in October, we're going to have an in-depth on municipal government, the different municipalities, their responsibilities. And Pat Christmas from the Committee of 70 is going to be talking to us about that. So keep on your radar screen, go to the Pennsylvania League of Women Voters events page, and as soon as we have dates for that, it will be up. So once again, I thank you for sharing this beautiful evening with us, and we hope to see you again at other Ballot Box Basics. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.